So in the last video for our digital painting, I showed you how to make a 1000 by 1000 pixel file to just paint a shape in there. Test out this new brush. Go to edit, say define brush preset, and then go to brush settings to actually set what really matters, which are the shape dynamics. Whether it goes thick to thin with pressure, whether it's angled, whether its shape is jittering a little bit as it goes, which is nice. And then, of course, you can set its size and its opacity, but you won't be able to set its hardness on a custom brush because hardness is already built in. Okay, so once you have that and you think that that's pretty useful, then you can go back to your original. And whatever brush you're on, it will keep those settings. See how those shape dynamics stayed on this. But if I wanted to change my brush, that's my very wet brush, to my dry brush up here, notice how all the shape brush settings get stripped when I change brushes. So you really just want to figure out what brush you want to use, whether it's one you make or whether it's one that is already in Photoshop, or one that you've downloaded as an ABR file and loaded in. This Pastel Palooza. Pretty interesting. So all these brushes aren't all that different, and it's mostly shape dynamics that make them interesting. Right? And you can actually see the different kind of shape dynamics they use. And a lot of them work with foreground and background color mixing. But you always want to play with your opacity. You can actually play with your flow as well. That's like how fully saturated, not just how fully opaque the color is. And you can get some interesting effects for refined painting. Right, so let's say I'll just use this brush. Whatever brush it is, you want to understand how it works. And I'm on my refined paint layer, so I'm just going to delete all that stuff. And now I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to start refine painting something. And one way to do this is to turn on your window and click on Navigator. So Navigator is this little tool that allows you, without having to hit Command plus or Command minus, to zoom in and move around your image without having to hold the space bar. And it has the added advantage of showing you what your piece looks like from a distance, right? Instead of always being close up. So if I use the Navigator and I kind of zoom into this, I can still use the space bar and move things down. I'm going to select a color. And now I'm going to try my new brush. And this is the pastel one. And my problem with it is it just takes so much pressure to build it up. I don't love it. So actually test your brush out. I'm going to use one of the ones I made because I understand those a little bit better. And then I'm going to set its brush settings. And I have brush settings already in my window here, but you just find it under window. And you can get pretty fast at doing these things. You just want to play with each of them a little bit, and then play with your size and your opacity. All right, so now this is going to work a lot faster for me, just for the way I like to work. And I'm going to use it fairly big, but remember it's pressure sensitive. And you see how it has that kind of soft edge of a wet brush, where it's kind of blending into the paper. And I'm going to work at about 50% opacity as I refined paint. And this is about kind of cleaning up some of these transitions between that kind of rough, solid painting underneath. And what's most efficient is just mostly using just 1 or 2 brushes for the whole project. And just controlling how you shape them. Right? So already with just that little bit of refined painting, which is not a lot, it's kind of a low opacity layering of paint. You'll see how this eye looks very different now than this eye. So if we turn off the base painting layer, that's all I did with refined paint. But with that brush and with the lower opacities, you see how the edges blend a little bit more believably? And they work on top of my base painting layer. Now, just like when you're doing digital coloring, I recommend, or compositing, I recommend you don't go more than 200% in, right? That will show you your actual like paint texture. But most of my painting, I'm going to do it at like 50%, especially at this stage, because I'm just trying to get things covered. And digital painting takes time. So whereas before it was like I was painting with a big heavy marker just to fill up the white, now it's like I'm painting with makeup brushes and kind of putting powder down that softly shows what's underneath. And what's fun is I can still steal color. I want to keep it from being too boring and obvious. And I can use some of my references to help with that. And there's the value shapes you're building, but there's also the color and the kind of strokes and the direction, all these things that make a painting interesting to look at. And remember, I have this AI generated reference from Crayon that is pretty interesting and gives me some nice things to react to. But my goal is to make it better than an AI generated image, to make it more personally to my choices, my aesthetics. So instead of using white to like brighten, I might use the yellow of this sun or the pink of these different things I've found. And you want to work kind of basic and broad to specific. But I like to work into a focal point like the eye, not get a final finish necessarily, but get an idea of the full value range. From the lightest light to the darkest dark that I'm going for. And then build from there. And then as you're painting, you're going to learn lessons about it. You're going to see what feels controllable to you, what's workable for you. And that's to your benefit in other parts of the painting. Now, as long as we don't vary from this brush, it should keep its brush settings and be pretty true and helpful to us. But the hard thing at this stage is not just focusing on the fun areas, trying to get around to everything. And depending on kind of the painting style you're going for, there might be areas that just need work that you have to kind of force yourself to acknowledge and get to, so that everything has a level of finish to it. If you struggle for an hour on getting the eyes right, you just don't have time to make anything else look good. You're not doing yourself any favors in the long run. So I'm just have my finger hovering over that option key, and I'm stealing colors right from myself, blending them into each other. And I just do this through opacity. This is my preference. But there are tools that can help us with blending as well. And I'll get into those, and mainly that's something called the smudge tool, which a lot of people really like in digital painting, because it softens as it blends adjoining pixels for you. And you can see why I needed to assert some pretty strong colors from the beginning. Because once you're just mostly stealing from your own pixels, the colors can all kind of average out towards the middle. So I want to reassert those when I can. And why it's better not to just steal colors from photo reference, because all those colors will get very muddied. Now this is true digital painting, where we're just creating our own pixels. We're not painting them on top of the photo. Everything is our choice. If you notice, I just noticed because I was hovering over option that my brush changed to a little bullseye. And that's just because I had the caps lock on. That just changes it from a brush size view to a precision view. So just uncheck your caps lock if you're not seeing your brush size in real time. And I like to use kind of cool shadows, warm highlights, kind of classic color theory, especially for portraiture. But you might find your own ways.